Dear distinguished speakers, dear friends, muito obrigado à Comissão Nacional para os Direitos Humanos pelo convite para este webinar num dia muito especial e muito importante para a humanidade. We are all united on this, the International Women's Day, to renew our commitments to empowering the recovery through women's leadership. This is the theme of the forthcoming OECD March on Gender. The COVID pandemic's toll on economies and societies have been immense. It's also threatening to reverse the progress made in advancing gender equality over the last half-century. The headline figures may be painting a rather ambiguous picture. During the fourth quarter of last year, the OECD unemployment rate for women was 7.4% compared to 6.8% for men. Global job losses were higher for women at 5% compared to men at 3.9%. These are the figures from the ILO. But still, the full labor market impact of the pandemic is yet to become clear. And in fact, we know from the ground that women have been disproportionately affected by this crisis. Women face higher risks of economic insecurity. They are overrepresented in the informal sector, in non-regular jobs, and in sectors, key economic sectors such as tourism, retail, which have been hit worst by the crisis. Women are also generally less able to absorb shocks and therefore risk long-term scarring and detachment from the labor market. Focus on the health sector. 70% of the workforce is women. These are the heroes of the crisis, but they are also the great sufferers of increased stress, burnout, insomnia, depression, and in some cases, even suicide. We also see a horrifying surge in domestic violence globally, in particular, intimate partner violence. An additional 15 million women face gender-based violence for every 3 months of lockdown. And violence against women is costing our global economy more than 1.3 trillion euros. And that's not even counting the indirect costs, like dropping out of education systems or dropping out of the labor force. Now, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the Istanbul Convention. Most OECD countries, of course, have signed on to it, but we need concrete actions. I therefore very much welcome Portugal's leadership as part of its presidency of the Council of Europe by creating an EU-wide single hotline to report domestic violence and by organizing a dedicated conference. These are very important developments, and we also need to redouble our efforts to close the gender gaps in our economies, to eliminate the barriers to gender equality, and to make the recovery gender responsive. These commitments came out loud and clear from our members, the OECD members, at last year's OECD Ministerial Council meeting, which was chaired by Spain. Look at the situation again. There's been improvement, but gender gaps across the OECD remain. In wages, we're stuck at around 13%, and in labor force participation, a gap of around 15.5%. Look at senior decision-making positions. Women hold less than a third of ministerial positions, while corporate boards only have a quarter of women. Now, change doesn't happen by itself. We need to legislate, but we also need to implement. We need to reform. We need to act. I therefore welcome very much Portugal's push to reach a consensus on the Women on Boards Directive in the Council of Europe. For years, the OECD has promoted the gender equality and the inclusive, sustainable growth agendas as inseparable. This is truer today than ever before. We will just not only discuss gender equality, we have to, of course, we have to analyze, we have to cover those gender data gaps that we have. But what we can do is to count on the OECD to make change happen. Thank you very much.